This video contains spoilers for EXU Calamity Episode 4. Hi everybody, my name is Luna and welcome to Crit Role Conspiracies, the show where we look at all of the hidden details and the wild and wacky theories that critters have about Critical Role. Because of just how long this episode was, I have split this video into two parts. Part 2 is going to come out
on Wednesday,
so stay tuned for that. Brennan kicks off the finale in exactly the same way that he opened in Episode 1.
Fire. Everything feels slow. There's movement and there's heat, but the only noise you can hear, despite all this chaos, is breath. Fire. Everything feels slow. There's movement and there is heat, but the only noise you can hear, despite all this chaos, is breath.
Time slows down and we see things in fractions of a second. We're pretty used to things taking longer in real time than they do in the D&D world, given that every round of combat is 6 seconds and that could be a few minutes. But I don't think we have ever seen less than a second take more than an hour before. As Laerryn's blight spell hits the tree and the Lord of the Hells climbs out, Brennan calls for a constitution save from Paisha, explaining that she wants to fail. And the reason that she wants to fail is otherwise she would still be holding onto the tree when the explosion happens. And as it is, it's already pretty bad when her arm is severed below the elbow and she is blasted back along with Loquacious. As the Lord of Hells arrives, he sends out a wave of this dispelling magic which dispels and explodes almost all of their magical items. This, of course, was foreshadowed in the very first episode when they found the celestial bow that had been dispelled and corroded in Vespin's sanctum, clearly happening as he released Asmodeus and all of the other betrayer gods from their prison planes. So, each player has to roll a saving throw for every single magical item that they have, so let's take a quick look at what those items are. Paisha has a Staff of Power, which gives a +2 to attack and damage rolls, as well as a +2 bonus to her armor class and to any saving throws. It also has this feature which Brennan points out would have been particularly problematic if she had failed that save, which is Retributive Strike. It states that as an action, you can break the staff over your knee or against a solid surface. The staff is destroyed and it releases its remaining magic in an explosion that expands to fill a 30-foot radius sphere. So, given how much magic Paisha has, it probably would have been a fairly big explosion and probably would have killed the party. Yikes. She also has a Ring of Protection, which just gives a +1 bonus to her AC and saving throws. And she has a Ring of Mind Shielding, which makes her immune to other people reading her thoughts. This magic item does fail and explodes, exploding her fingers off of her hand as it happens. Ooh. Now, she doesn't actually roll for her Arcane Focus, which is that orb that floats around her, and that she also uses to capture memories and to store information in. Last week, I posited that it was a representation of the Keen Mind feat, and someone in my comments last week suggested that maybe it was a Crystalline Chronicle from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So I'm wondering if she just forgot to roll a save for it, or if it is that physical representation and therefore isn't considered like a magic item, it's just her arcane focus. Loquacious rolls next. He also has a Ring of Protection, which fails. He also loses his pneumatic tubes, which I think was essentially just an at-will sending, flavored to have these pneumatic tubes. And he loses his Shift Weave clothing, which is magical clothing that can have up to 5 designs stored in it that you can change with a command word, leaving him in, honestly, true Sam Riegel fashion, pretty much naked. He also has this piece of worked ether, this pure magical spell energy, essentially able to restore a spell slot. Maybe it's a reworking of a Pearl of Power that Laerryn kind of smuggled onto him, and when he rolls a save for that item, he rolls a natural 20. Just true love working to protect him. And that's not the only thing protecting him. Laerryn also throws her arcane ward over him, which is a feature of her abjuration subclass. Moving on to Nidus. He has a defender's scimitar, which gives him a +3 bonus to his attack and damage rolls, and it also allows him to transfer that bonus to his armor class, something that we do see him use a couple of times this episode. He also has a ring of protection and a bag of holding. The last one is the only one which fails, sending his collected wealth and gold scattering and melting into nothing. Laerryn, very conservatively, only has 2 magic items. She has her Ring of Masks, which I think is just an at-will sending homebrewed item, and she also has her all-purpose tool, which is technically only for artificers, but I think given that she's essentially an artificer wizard, they've just flavored it that it works for her. This item allows you to transform it into any number of sort of standard tools that you might need as an artificer, and it also gives you access to a cantrip. She does succeed on the save for the all-purpose tool, but sadly she does lose the Ring of Masks. Next is Zerxus, who seems to have, I think, the most magical items out of all of them. He has a plate mail +2, he has a shield +2, which he loses. He has a belt of storm giant strength, that's how he gets a strength score of 29. And he also has his Holy Avenger. Brennan does specify that he doesn't actually need to roll the save for the Holy Avenger. Instead, it is corroded and everything in the same way that the bow was. Just it immediately is dispelled. There's no save there. Abria did tweet whilst the show was broadcasting that Brennan told them they could have as many magic items as they wanted. He didn't put a cap on it at all, which is why some have lots and maybe some don't have as many. And I think it's very funny just picturing him making that decision and telling them all, knowing that this was probably going to happen, that they were going to take all this damage depending on how many magic items they have. And I think it's a great reflection of this theme of hubris in this series, where it's like they rely so much on their magical tools and their magical items, and they place so much faith in them, and in the end a lot of that was their undoing. Almost everybody takes a butt ton of damage from their magic items exploding, but hey, that's not all. There's more. The fire and the bludgeoning damage from the tree being sundered is next resolved, and it is 72 points of fire damage and 71 points of bludgeoning damage. This is when things start to get really grim.
My total hit points were 86, so I think that does.
Oh no.
In the eruption of fire, as you twist, the blast hits Paisha, and you can already see, Zerxus, that Paisha's head twists past the point that she can remain alive as she is consumed in fire. Paisha is dead.
The reason Paisha died immediately is because of one of the rules in D&D about taking massive amounts of damage. When damage reduces you to 0 hit points and there is damage remaining, you die if the remaining damage equals or exceeds your hit point maximum. No death saves, no nothing, just bye. So Paisha is dead, Loquacious, Nidus, and Zerxus are all unconscious, and we get a little glimpse into their final moments as this is happening.
Nidus wanted this city to be great, and feels as if he's failed. This is his fault.
I think she processes all of the knowledge that she's just been flooded with. And in that instant realizes you can hold all the knowledge in the world, but if it dies with you, it doesn't matter.
His body and face is now liquid, changing rapidly as he flies through the air. You see his face quickly morph between several different other faces. And then finally, the face, it's not a face, it's the mask of the Matron of Ravens is the last one that you see sort of cross over my face. It's a blank white mask, and then I just fall unconscious.
But before Zerxus can be harmed anymore, a time stop spell is cast through the room. This is a 9th level spell, and presumably it was cast by the Lord of the Hells himself, and he heals Zerxus, bringing him back to consciousness. Time starts to get super wibbly wobbly here, so I might get some things slightly out of sequence, but this is generally how things go down. Following the Lord of the Hells out of the tree is Vespin Chloris. This fits with what we know about Vespin from the source material, the published books, which is that he attempted to attain godhood by reaching out to the betrayer gods, and instead they slew him and he became a servant for Asmodeus in the Nine Hells. Oh, something I should note, actually, I forgot to do this last week. So when Critical Role started, they used a lot of the gods from D&D lore, like the Raven Queen and Lolth and Asmodeus and Grumsh, and now they're publishing their own material and their own intellectual property. They are changing those names so that they are different for copyright reasons from the D&D lore. So sometimes I'll say Asmodeus when actually in Critical Role canon now, like moving forward, it is the Lord of the Hells. And same with the Raven Queen, it's now the Matron of Ravens. I just wanted to point that out for any newer critters who might join us who might be like, wait, who's this Asmodeus person? We haven't heard of him before. Laerryn, who is the last one conscious, is standing there frozen in time in this time stop spell. And even though the Lord of the Hells is right there and Vespin, all she can do is keep looking at Loquacious.
Even though she sees all of that, from the moment he turned and Quay told me that he was afraid of what I was in this moment, she never took her eyes off of him. So even with all of this, she's still staring at him and sobbing. It wasn't supposed to be like this.
Now we get here like a weird, I think it's like a vision thing that Zerxus is having, that the Lord of the Hells is kind of providing to him. It's all very like, I don't know, he's floating in the time stop spell, but there's also someone there. But essentially, Zerxus sees a fiery heart within the tree, and in this heart, he sees a figure writhing in pain. I think at some moments it looks like Evandrin, his husband, and in other moments it looks like the beautiful figure of the Lord of the Hells, who he tended to in the Hall of Prophecy. And Zerxus reaches out to him, and his blood reaches out to the heart. His blood is coming from this wound made by Zartaza the Devil in the last episode. And he pulls the heart out of the tree, therefore bringing the Lord of the Hells fully into Exandria and into the material plane. Now, a quick note about Zartaza. A few of you pointed this out in the comments last week. This was something I completely missed, and I also got totally wrong last week. So there was a moment when there was a conversation happening in the battle last week, and I got confused as to who was saying what. It was actually this devil, this fiend, that was talking to Zerxus at the time. She is an Irenes, which is a kind of fiend, and we've seen this name pop up before, and you very clever people out there noticed it, because she is mentioned in the description of the Mace of the Black Crown, an arm of the Betrayer, which was published in Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. Her soul lives within the mace, and she is trying to recruit more souls for the Lord of the Hells. And so we get to see the creation of this weapon, this basically a vestige of the Betrayer gods in this episode, which is super duper cool. Okay, so back to Zerxus and pulling Asmodeus out of the tree. Gotta love the guy, but he is severely deluded about his ability to redeem the literal Lord of the Hells. He tries to cast Cleansing Touch to cleanse him of his sins and return him to a more pure form of himself. And the Lord of the Hells is all sweet and smiles until he reveals his true nature.
You're trying to atone me. And I didn't do anything wrong. Oh! And he stabs you through the heart. Oh! You want to know what I've always hated about mortals? And you feel his claws dig into the back.
You're wrong! I lay a hand on him and I cast Remove Curse.
Oh, God.
He laughs uproariously.
Look at me. This is not who you are. This is not who you are!
Who am I?
You're not this! How have you forgotten?
Now, I'll tell you why I spit on your forgiveness. I'll tell you why I loathe your redemption. To reach a hand down to somebody, they need to be beneath you! And I'm beneath nobody. You wanted to understand me. Then you should have accepted that I was right! And he pulls the back of your head and rips the skin off of your skull.
Oh my! You do have 3 hit points. Maybe you'll survive this.
The Lord of the Hells talks with Zerxus about why they are doing what they're doing and explains that actually it's not the prime deities who are their enemies. The mortals are the ones who caused the prime deities to cast aside their siblings, the betrayer gods. And Asmodeus is pissed about this.
My greatest heartbreak is that when I have collected every last mortal soul and all of my siblings into my pit, that I will only have eternity to punish them.
It is truly terrifying seeing Brennan embody this character. Like, he just does it so well. And Asmodeus healing Zerxus and bringing him back to life only to kill him over and over again was truly horrifying. And I think we could not have it any other way for this, the Lord of the Hells. What I found so funny about this moment was both like Abria and Luis being like, wait, let me try this. Abria's like, wait, when do I get something between a time stop? And Brennan has to be like, well, he's a god. He just casts time stop continuously. And then Luis is like, oh, I cast Resilient Sphere on myself. And Brennan's just like, okay, he just immediately counterspells. Like, the gods are beyond the rules of D&D. Like, they don't cast 9th level spells. They cast spells that we don't even have levels for because they're gods. That's what they do. Zerxus touches the namestone of Evandrin at his chest, and the time stop spell fades, and we return to the point of view of Laerryn. She dimension doors away, leaving the others behind, believing them all to be dead, which they pretty much are at this point. She casts tongues, and she hears the Lord of the Hells speaking about the Canalthi and have they completed the infernal runes that they needed to do. And these Canalthi begin to burn and sunder themselves as devils crawl through their flesh, and devils are now roaming all across the city of Avalier. We also get confirmation that the betrayers are planning to release the primordials, as he speaks of the Empress and the Emperor and how they can take care of Avalier because he has business in Vasselheim. And he opens a gate to Gordranus. This is when we finally learn a little bit more about Gordranus, because I was questioning a bit of like, when does this secret city get built? Because we know in the lore that Gordranus was the city the betrayer gods built in secret, and that is where they launched their surprise attack from Vasselheim. This was something that I thought happened over a longer period of time, like potentially a century or something like this, because in my mind, it takes a lot of time to build a city, but of course I'm forgetting that like these are actual gods, and they have done it in the 2 weeks since Vespin released them. The thing that I'm a little bit curious about is this city on Exandria on the material plane, or was it in a like parallel plane, or the plane that Asmodeus was stuck in before Zerxus pulled him through? If you have any ideas about this, let me know, because I get the feeling that maybe it was in that sort of like parallel dimension and not actually on the material plane, since he couldn't come through at that stage. We do know that Gordranus was built in Jorhaus in Wildmount, and that the city of Roshana now stands above it. So there is a link to the material plane, and it's just a matter of like, I don't know, I want to know how these things actually intersect and work. In Gordranus, he greets the Ruiner, aka Grumsh in the D&D lore. Grumsh? And they have a little double day planned to go and attack Vasselheim. It's at this moment that Loquacious finally fails his last death save, and Sam just has to get one last one in there in true Sam fashion.
Hey, Brennan, do I know? Do I feel it? That he's gone?
You do.
Did that stone that you gave me happen to have any sort of spell in it?
It was spell energy. Could it have given him advantage or something?
No.
Okay.
As he fades away,
This is the true betrayal.
The
true betrayal that we're experiencing.
the last phallic shape that you see looks exactly like Brennan.
I know this is a very silly moment, but I actually think it's a really important like coping mechanism because this is such a heavy and intense series, and sometimes you need those moments of levity to kind of take a little breather and then come back to it. So I actually really appreciated that because it did add a little bit of time to just like okay, so we return back to the astral realm, and the touching of the namestone, of Evandrin's namestone, seems to have connected Zerxus' spirit to him. I think it's because Zerxus is basically dead and it's just his spirit now that is floating in the astral realm. And Evandrin explains to him that he volunteered to be in the experiment with the astral Laerryn. And the reason that he started fading was because he was anchored to the astral plane once he had visited there, and the tree was trying to sort of expel him out of the material plane as an intruder. After a very emotional reunion between the two of them, Zerxus feels his spirit being pulled back, and he sort of has to make a decision here, whether to stay or whether to go back to the material plane and to do what he can for his son Ilias. And of course, that is what he decides to do.
If Ilias is to be saved, then you know what must be done.
If any of them are to be saved, then I know what must be done.
Your hand grasps the mace.
I say to him, what follows the age of Arcanum eventually must be the age of salvation. And I grab it with all of my strength.
He looks at you. Fire. Your gleaming armor is charred with flame beyond recognition. Your skull begins to split as two curling ram's horns move from your skull. You see Evandrin looks and goes, Zerxus, no! Zerxus! You feel yourself being pulled.
Returning to the material plane, Zerxus casts Cleansing Touch on Vespin, and it actually does work this time. We get to see a glimpse of who Vespin was before he became a servant of the Lord of the Hells. He meddles with the infernal contract that Zerxus made for his soul, giving him until sunrise, only a very short amount of time to try and do something to save Avalere, to save his son, and potentially to save himself. Vespin only has a moment. He is continually transforming back into this fiendish form, but as he is there, human again for just a short time, he expresses sorrow and horror at what he has done. He wanted to try and take the place of a betrayer god rather than a prime deity to achieve godhood. And this is what he's done. And he sort of says, this is how the world will remember me. I will forever be a villain. And I think this is a really interesting statement or story about how history is written by the victors. It's true. Vespin will always be known as a villain, and that is justified for what he did. But there is this other side to the story that we don't really get to know about. Zerxus, being a paladin, has access to the spell Revivification, so he revives Loquacious, and he also manages to heal Nidus and revive Patia as well. We did know this had to happen somehow since the episode was 6 hours long, and this was only an hour into the episode. Before Vespin reverted to his fiendish form, he did tell them that they should go to the Hall of Prophecy. So they rush there and they meet Carwyn, the Oracle in the Magic Circle. They break the Magic Circle and she makes her final prophecy.
Her eyes roll back in her head and she rises from her bed into the air. When crowned fire and a throned earth stride forth to join ancient war anew, then mother and father shall fall to the hands of their imprisoned kin, and all the stars will weep until the death of light for lost Exandria, whose every ashen breath will wish for death, and never knowing peace shall stumble evermore to seek in vain the end of horror without name.
Laerryn has a bad idea to essentially plane shift on the astral Laerryn that she created, the primordials, so that they will be banished from Exandria forever. An incredibly risky plan, but one that could just work. And then Laerryn and Loquacious kiss. Okay, so while all of this is happening, Cerrit has not been there, so we're gonna cut to Cerrit now. The city is in full-fledged panic as devils are running rampant, and he is rushing back to his home where he meets his children who are there, obviously terrified and scared, not knowing what's happening. Lord help me, this scene broke me. We're gonna talk about it. It's gonna be fine. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. Cerrit takes the runes of recall and he places them in his children's hands, making them promise to look after each other and that they are going to be safe with their mother, and he promises that he is going to come and find them. They're both crying and Cerrit says to them, I'll always have my eye on you. And then he breaks the runes of recall and they are teleported away and he is left alone in his house. He is overcome with fury and sadness about how much time he gave to the city of Avalere and how much time he lost with his children, and how all of that service has led essentially to nothing in his eyes at this moment, because this is what's happening. He's powerless to do anything else to help them.
Even as I start to hear the familiar sounds of flame, I head over to their rooms. I open the threshold and just stand. And I take in how long it's been since I just looked. Really looked. Here. Not outside of this dwelling, but here.
Your brilliant detective's mind looks at a room and begins to piece together stories, tiny fractions of a detail. From the turn of a corner of a notebook on Maya's desk, you see that she has an incredible talent for history. Otherwise, why would she have gotten so far ahead in that chapter book? You look and see under Kier's bed the telltale carpet throw of a child hiding some kind of toy weapon or something that he shouldn't have, and see from the shape of it that they are small hand axes. And here in this moment you put all of your vast intellect to work so that as the flames begin to lick the wall behind you, you solve the mystery of who your children were.
Yeah, that's just not cool.
God damn it, Brennan Lee Mulligan, I hate you so much right now. For a long moment, I thought that he was going to stay in the burning home, and I think it probably crossed Travis's mind as well. It's really funny, Lou points out later in the episode, or I think it might even be in this moment, like, you all made a mistake by putting your kids in this. Like, why did you put kids in? Why did you put family in? But I think that is what makes this story, I mean, that's the stakes, right? That's what they're fighting for. They're fighting for the future. And I think any parent or any person with children in their life who they love, that's what you're fighting for all the time, is for them to have a better life than you did. So I think it really just adds that layer of knife in the heart emotion and drama. Luckily, Cerrit steals himself and does go off to the Meridian Labyrinth, where all of the party reconvene, and they bump heads a little bit about whose fault everything is, but they don't really have enough time for finger pointing. They split off into various places, all with different goals to achieve. Zerxus and Cerrit head to Cathmoira, to Ilias. Nidus heads to the Golden Scythe to get some of the Taxmen constructs. Loquacious heads to the Herald's Tome to broadcast and warn the people. Paisha heads to the Archsept, and Laerryn heads to the Astral Layrite. Now, speaking of Laerryn, Abria actually wrote this quite long post on her Tumblr about Laerryn's motivations and wanting to clear some things up a little bit. So she talks about how Laerryn wasn't trying to plane shift the city. I think we all jumped to that conclusion because of the Celestial Bow and how she needed something from that plane, some metal, to complete her work, which we all kind of assumed to be the plane shift spell, because one of the components for that spell is a metal rod from the plane of existence that you're trying to get to. What she is actually trying to do is she is trying to create a new road, a new pathway that they can use to travel if they want to, but they don't have to. It's just that it has to happen now during the apogee solstice for building the roadway, but they don't necessarily have to take it now. So in Laerryn's mind, she's not forcing anyone to do anything. Yes, she is shorting the tithe. Yes, she is going to ruffle some feathers and she's going to have some answering to do. But in her mind, it's worth the risk because she is contributing to the furtherance and the discovery of Avalier. And she's basically like, I'm going to ask for forgiveness, not for permission. Now, of course, she certainly made some selfish decisions along the way, but all of the characters did. So we can't really just point the finger squarely at Laerryn as having resulted in this. And in reality, if she hadn't done this work, if she hadn't built the astral layrite, they would not have had the option to send the primordials or to banish them away to begin with. So I think that was a really good little insight into Laerryn's thought processes behind everything. I'll link the Tumblr post in the description below if you want to check it out for yourself. I mean, I want to be super clear that I adore Laerryn, and even though I kind of poked fun last week about like, haha, I can't believe like Abria's character would do that, you know, I genuinely think she is just a wonderfully built character, so many flaws and so engaging. Okay, so that is part 1 done. This is when the episode takes a break. Let me know your thoughts about this first half of the episode and if I missed any little details, and stay tuned for part 2 coming out on Wednesday. I'd like to say a special thank you to my patrons, as always, for their support, and just hugs to everybody because I think we needed it after this episode. Bye!
Go fucking.
Hey, gang.
Don't look at him. Put your eye.
He can't
start it.
Get it out now. We haven't started yet. Get it out now.
We're fine.
Play this today.
Oh my god, I've been filming for 40 minutes. That is why I'm splitting this into 2.